A continuing tragedy in Nigeria. Hundreds are dead and thousands displaced as violence shocks the central Plateau state. In a complex web of religious and ethnic-based fighting, can Nigerian authorities stop attacks and massacres from spreading? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Nigeria. Well, Nigeria is no stranger to ethnic and religious clashes, especially in its northern and central states. But recently, violent attacks against some 20 villages resulted in hundreds of estimated deaths, with many more injured. On Monday, thousands of Christians protested in Jos, the capital of Plateau State, calling on the government to deploy security forces to prevent further massacres. But even if the government intervenes, the UN has warned that the escalating violence combined with economic and climate change pressures could add a hunger crisis to an already volatile mix. Here's a look now at what's been happening in Nigeria and what could lie ahead.
Mourning and anger in Nigeria. Armed groups have killed almost 200 people in a series of attacks during the Christmas season in the central state of Plateau. Many others have been injured, while thousands have fled their homes. It is the latest and one of the deadliest episodes of violence in the religiously and ethnically divided region. Clashes between the mainly Muslim Fulani herders and mostly Christian farmers have killed tens of thousands in over 2 decades, claiming more lives than the terrorist insurgency of Boko Haram.
They shoot me, and I fall down, start to cry. Leave me. They say they're not going to leave me. And I start to beg. They just shoot me again, and I sleep like I don't die. Then they don't carry my gun, leave me there.
Plateau State is part of Nigeria's diverse middle belt, which is known as the country's food basket. The competition for resources and land is one of the drivers of the conflict, which has been exacerbated by population growth and the effects of climate change. Rising violence has also worsened the food crisis in the country. Crops have been destroyed, and the exodus of farmers has left the farms abandoned. The World Food Programme in Nigeria says this year an estimated 26.5 million Nigerians will face food insecurity, with 9 million children at risk of malnutrition. Visiting the violence-hit state, Nigerian Vice President Kashim Shettima promised justice for the victims.
Now is the time to reassure you that this inter-community violence, which has hijacked the humanity and serenity of this beautiful state over the past decades, will never persist under our watch. We will harness all our resources to bring those responsible to justice. We will not rest until we are able to prevent the recurrence of these heinous acts.
Yet the locals say security forces have failed to protect them. On Monday, thousands of Nigerian Christians marched to the state governor's office demanding an end to violence.
Christians in Plateau State have come under persistent attacks and killings without any decisive action taken to stop the killings. The attackers and their sponsors have become more emboldened to continue in their satanic schemes, while Christians are left in pain and sorrow.
A Nigerian rights group called on the International Criminal Court to investigate the ongoing violence, saying the successive governments in Nigeria have been unwilling or unable to prosecute cases of unlawful killings and other violations of international law in several parts of the country, and to provide effective remedies and reparations to victims and their families. The attacks from one group usually lead to a retaliatory attack from another. And while trying to recover from the recent violence, communities continue to brace for more bloodshed.
So what is really behind the continuing violence, and is the government serious about stopping it? Well, joining me now to debate that are from London, Joseph Adebola. He is the chairman of the All Progressives Congress in the UK. From Lagos, we have Ier Jonathan-Ichaver, founder of the Sesor Empowerment Foundation, as well as a former political candidate with the African Democratic Congress. And from London is Temitope Olodo. He is the president of Africa Security Forum UK. Thanks all so much for being with us. I appreciate it. Joseph, I'll start with you. The government hasn't really assessed blame here, though many argue it comes down to decades of ethnic fighting and or clashes between herders and farmers and even religious groups. But you seem to be convinced that it's much more political in nature. So how so? And is that why the government is not really saying who might be at fault?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on this program. First of all, let me start by condoling with the families of the victims, and I pray that God grant them the fortitude to bear this loss. And this dastardly act is condemnable by any right-thinking person. And as a Nigerian, I feel hurt that something like this is still happening in this day and age. And it's like I said, it seems both political and social what is going on. And all I can just say is first of all to condemn it in all ramifications, because this shouldn't be happening in this day and age in our country, because the country is grappling with a lot of things, and the last thing we want now is some renegades, going through some villages and killing people at random. Because when you look at the whole thing that happened there, it's an unprovoked attack, as far as I know.
But why do you believe there's a political element to it?
Well, thing is, every time there's an election cycle in Nigeria, and that election cycle is concluded, there seems to be some kind of upsurge of something like this. So that is the political element of it. And the other part of it is the fact that Plateau State is known to have a lot of mineral resources. And when you hear the stories of the survivors, and you can tell that it has to do with some people trying to to have control over the mineral resources of certain areas. So those are the two issues that I see is playing out here. But that is not to say that our government shouldn't be on top of things. I think we need to do more to ensure the safety of lives and property, because for me, as a person, one death is one death too many.
Okay.
So we shouldn't allow this to be going on.
Indeed.
So I just pray that moving forward now, our security architecture will be rejigged, and
I think everyone would agree the government should be taking
stop this from happening.
Indeed, the government should be taking action. But Ier, you've actually said that there's almost a perverse incentive for politicians not to stop the violence, because they could lose funding in certain states that is given to them to actually stop the fighting, and instead that's kind of funneled off into corrupt activities. And it's interesting as well, because the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation was just suspended today, exactly,
Absolutely.
For corruption and for financial mismanagement. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you. And I want to address my brother's point about it being election cycle. That is not the case. This has been a systemic issue across the Middle Belt, across the Northwest, across the Northeast. When we talk about violence, terrorism, and for the Middle Belt, if you look at Plateau, if you look at Benue, if you look at Taraba, if you look at Nasarawa State, across there, there's a complete land grab going on by Fulani militia terrorists who work and collude with some in government to go around killing. I mean, they've been killing in large numbers since 2013, late 2013, 2014. This crosses electoral cycles. I ran for elections in early this year. And while the elections were going on and the campaigns were going on, a whole horde, the witnesses reported about 100 of these Fulani militia. Some of them even reported sighting uniformed men wearing uniforms of some security agencies. Now, we don't know if they had stolen those uniforms or if there were people who could descending on villages in Benue to basically displace and kill and rape. And this is a system. Now, my constituency, there's a particular local government called War, which they displace the people. These people, they carry. And these are not clashes. Please let us stop saying these things are clashes. And let us stop please saying they're unprovoked attack. What is it that will provoke you? I believe.
Okay. I'll tell you what, Ier, we're having a lot of...
open her belly and take out the baby.
We're having some connection issues with your line. Let me just see if we can rectify those.
Right.
Let me move to Temitope quickly,
Okay.
because, I mean, do you believe that the government, as Ier was saying, could be possibly just complicit in these terrorist acts that we've been seeing in Nigeria?
There's no doubt in my mind that there's some elements within the government establishment that might be part of the fifth column that is causing all this havoc. Let no one doubt the power and the ability of the Nigerian armed forces to do something and for the security services to correct things if need be. Between Kaduna and Jos, or between Abuja and Jos, there are more than 10 helicopters in between those places. It will only take them 35 minutes, to be airborne and to be there. And these people operated for 12 hours. Now, if I remember quite well, it is only in movies like Stargate that people could disappear from the thin air and you don't know where they've gone to. So I don't know if there's a ring in Nigeria where people could, transform themselves to another galaxy after committing an offense. But what is laughable is that our security service are not fit for purpose when it comes to dealing with these issues. There are preventive measures that could be put in place to address some of these issues. You are now allowing citizens to arm themselves, yet you are allowing them to die, to be killed by individuals that are unknown, and yet you start your parties and you continue life as if nothing has happened. This needs to stop. 2024, we need to put a stop to this nonsensical approach and loss of life that is unnecessary.
Okay, let me ask Joseph. I'm surprised you said that, Temitope, but Joseph, I mean, do you think Nigerian citizens should be better allowed to arm themselves as a measure of protection?
That's a very tough one, allowing people to arm themselves because, human beings have a way of, you just need to look at America, what's happening in America now to understand that that would be a very dangerous thing. What I would advocate, however, just like my learned friend just said earlier, is I think our security people need to step up their intelligence gathering, because for me, I think what is happening now is the failure of intelligence. Because these dastardly acts are preventable if, in a situation where all things are equal, if the intelligence gathering is top notch, obviously such things would have been averted. And sometimes we tend to be reactive instead of being proactive. I think that is what the problem is. But I don't think allowing people to arm themselves will be the solution, because I don't want a situation where we will become like America, where anybody can just go to a shop.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope.
I don't think that's the right way to go.
Yeah. So asking the government to step up seems obvious, and the resources might even be there. But as Ier was saying, there are reasons that the government is not necessarily stepping up. But Ier, if I can come back to you, because I want to look at how this issue is actually being covered outside of Nigeria. Now, it is an undercover, less covered topic, unfortunately. It's very complicated sometimes for foreign audiences to understand. What Fox News actually said a few days ago, they said Christians are, quote, practically being hunted for sport in Nigeria as jihadis slaughter Christians. Okay, so Ier, would every single Christian in Nigeria say they're being targeted because they're Christian? And is it 100 times worse than anything we've seen?
I think it's 100 times worse than everything we've seen. But I think there are parts of the country where this is so much more prevalent. So, for example, of course, I think last year, I'm sure we all saw and we heard a young lady who was stoned by her Muslim classmates, or her rather fanatical Muslim classmates, because I don't think they're Muslim. But anyway, because she had made sexist statements to them, and they disagreed with her on religious grounds. Now, the people who did this filmed themselves, showed the match with which they used to set her ablaze after stoning her, and nobody has caught those people. There's no commitment on one side. So there is that appearance. And across, honestly, we've had lots of Catholic priests, even just recently in the last few days, they've gone, some so-called terrorists or gunmen or bandits. The Nigerian media and the security services can never decide when. We have seen systemic attacks on predominantly Christian communities, particularly in the northwest, particularly in the northeast, south, and particularly the middle belt. Right now, Plateau epicenter of it. Now, that is not to say that these terrorists do not also attack Muslim communities, because overarching all of this is, I believe, it's a land grab, resource grab. Of course, there are those within. There's the Boko Haram issue, which is tied around Islamist fundamentalism. There's also the Fulani militia issue, where there are allegations that the previous government allowed these Fulani militants to come into Nigeria from across, and they join forces with local militants under the aegis of being cattle rearers, and they go around with AK-47s, permitted by the Nigerian government, by the way, to carry AK-47s, go around destroying farms of predominantly Christian farming communities, and then going around attacking and killing these people. When the people complain, the previous president said that. So I would not say that every single Christian, because in the Southwest, there's not so much of that pressure. But mind you, we started seeing some of that in Ondo State, where they attack. Now, this Deborah one, why there's so much, why the Fox News would say what they said, because so many priests, so many Christian pastors have been abducted, beheaded, killed. So there's that whole element in Christian theology where there's persecution of Christians, and that has been going on. Even as they're preaching, they're beheaded. So I agree with them partially. I would not say, as I'm a Christian woman myself, I wouldn't say as one living in the Southwest, I can say I'm in fear every day. But I am also very careful if I see a group of young Muslim men going around, because you never know. Not always, but sometimes on a Friday, in the center of town, they may block the road.
Let me turn to Temitope, because Temitope, the Fulani are actually claiming that they are very unfairly being accused, and that they have been attacked as well. They say they've had their people killed, even their cows stolen, and that they face a lot of marginalization and discrimination. But meanwhile, because of the perception, you can tell me if you think it's true or false, in the United States, the Trump administration actually designated Nigeria as one of the world's foremost prosecutors of Christians and the worst violator of religious freedom in the world. I mean, that designation was reversed by the Biden administration, but should it have been?
I have to completely disagree. I'm one of the greatest critics of the Nigerian government myself. So let it be known, I will not condone anything. I'm a Muslim turned Christian. I'm evangelical. I lived in that part of the north, in Sokoto in particular. I know there's a lot of violence, extremism, and radicalization in those areas. This is what I study. But I could tell you very clearly, there's a lot of Christian communities in those areas that are not being prosecuted by their Muslim community because they have a better understanding. Most of these individuals that are involved in this violence extremism are illiterate, who do not have a better understanding of the religion that they say they follow. So, and I put it at that. In terms of Trump, his politics is completely radical in its sense. I'm saying that Nigeria is really an extremist country from that perspective is completely wrong. But just like my sister clearly mentioned, there are some areas and pockets of areas. And when I lived in that part of the north, I was also I faced even, I was called a social Muslim. So that's to tell you, when people are radicalized, they could go to any length. But that aside, Nigeria is a very, very complex country where there's a lot of things that need to be. There's politics mixed in everything that is done. That particular area that we're talking about is that in the Jaws or Middle Belt are areas that are very fertile, and there are people that that need those resources, and they will max themselves in all forms to get what they want. They will mark themselves as ethnic individuals of Fulani descendants, or they could be, Muslim fanatics, or they could even be animalistic individuals. But the bottom line is that the government is not doing enough to protect the citizen. And I think that is where we need to take it from, where we're saying people being killed and 12 hours after, there is still no help for them. And even after the death, there is no prosecution, no visible prosecution. That is where we should be coming from, because the individuals, if you look at the military formation, if you have a military formation, it's not just Muslim making it all. It's all combination of individuals of ethnicity. So you can't say all of them are working together to stop it. But you could see that because of corruption, because of inefficiency, because of lack of effective policy and political will, things are not happening the way it should happen in a modernized society where there are rule of law.
You know, Joseph, the U.S. currently, as well as the United Nations, also believe that climate change and other economic pressures, rooted in part in climate change, are playing a major role here, and that it could get much worse going forward because there will be this scramble for farmland and resources. Are you worried about that as a Nigerian?
Yes, you see, yes, I'm worried a bit about that. But again, let me just digress a little bit with the Fox News narrative there. For me, it's a very dangerous narrative to be putting out there, because I was born in the North, I grew up there, and I know a lot about, the politics and the economics of the North. The issue of Muslims against Christians has never been an issue. Yes, there are, skirmishes here and there, and for anybody, especially Trump, to say, Nigeria is, to describe Nigeria the way he did, for me, is completely wrong, because whether we like it or not, the fact remains that Nigeria has more places of worship, both for Christians and Muslims, than almost any, even more than America. So the issue of religion, I don't think should be something that anybody should be promoting this time around. Yes, of course, there are other issues that that needs to be tackled by the government, and I believe that the new administration we have now, from what we have seen so far, they seem to be to have their eyes on the ball, and it's just a matter of time before things begins to gel together. I think we just need to watch this space. I wouldn't condemn the country because I know things are being done in a different way now. So we just need to give it time, and and we'll see how things will pan out.
But do you worry though about the climate conditions changing and putting more pressure on people that are already, in poverty and suffering, and with the UN saying there could be another hunger crisis? Do you fear that?
Well, yeah, I do feel that, but what I'm saying, but the fact remains that what we're talking about here, this issue of pressure, is global. It's not just peculiar to Nigeria. Even in the UK, where I live in here, people are pressured because of economic reasons. So I wouldn't want to blacklist Nigeria because of that, because it's a global phenomenon. And yes, it's higher in some places, in some countries, than the others, which is which is understandable. But like I said, we have a government now in place who seems to to be grappling with it, and they seem to be doing things right. So like I said, it's just a matter of time. Yes, I'm worried, but I'm not too worried, because I know we have people in place now, who seem to be to have their hands on the buzzer now, and they are ready. They have the political will to turn things around, and I believe it's just a matter of time before we begin to see positive changes in the country.
Okay, I hope that is indeed the case, Joseph. That will have to be the final word. I'd like to thank really all three of my panelists so much for being with us on this edition of The Newsmakers, and our viewers, of course, for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on X, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.